Hi, I'm Tamika,
And I'm Kidan.
and we
We
are
are
two
two
brown
brown
ladies,
ladies.
unbounded. Today we are sitting here with Todd, who is the owner of.
Second Son Acupuncture and Herbal Medicine.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about uh, Second Son?
Well, Second Son Acupuncture is the business that I started after I attained my degree in acupuncture and Eastern medicine. I've been operating since 2020.
Okay, congratulations.
Yeah.
You're a fairly new business. So how did you get started on that journey?
That's a complicated question because there's rarely one instance that changes your life like that, but Eastern culture has been part of my family. My uncle was a merchant marine, and he would bring back books and objects from the East, and that got me into it as a young person. And as I grew and studied martial arts, I was introduced to doctors of that ancient medicine, and it really, my curiosity got to me, and I followed suit. So I've been studying informally since around 2000. And then formally, I went back for my master's in 2016.
Oh wow, so it's been quite the journey. It's a 20-year journey.
Yeah.
22 years, actually. So originally you talked about martial arts. How does that contribute to your journey with holistic medicine?
Well, the medicine at its outset in China was really related to all the health practices, which became also the practices of self-defense. So if you go back to the Shaolin Temple, the monks there, the Taoism and the Buddhism of that time were really the foundations for medicine, but also the foundations for the martial arts. And so they're coupled in Chinese culture or Asian culture, and they're also coupled as we got introduced to them. So as a kid, you'd watch a kung fu movie, and there'd always be somebody with some special herbs or what have you. And I was very fortunate when I lived in New York to join a martial arts school whose master was 98 years old at the time, and he was a doctor. And so it was a very practical experience of seeing him make medicines, seeing him apply medicines and prescribe medicines, and people were really reliant on him. And it was at a time in the country where there was no health care, there was a crisis, people weren't really being treated fairly or had the opportunity to be healthy. And here was someone who had a tradition over 60 generations, and he was able to help people right here and now. And so that really made me more aware of what could be possible.
So with that being said, the health crisis and people that don't have access to resources for all the traditional medicines, how have you seen that play a role in your own community?
Well, I find that people are very interested in alternatives to the medical system that we have now. And while there's still kind of a mystery around what acupuncture is or what herbal medicine is, how it's prescribed, there's an interest because people know that there's not being satisfied as patients, whether that's because the medicine doesn't work or the relationship with the practitioner isn't a healing one. And one factor about health is what your diet is. Many of the herbs that we use are herbs and spices that you actually have in your cabinet. So it's my responsibility as best I can to familiarize a person with what they have available to them and the potency of those things. And then if need be in the prescription takes on herbs that are not familiar, then at least there's a foundation.
Yeah. I like that. I'm sorry to cut you off. So the two go hand in hand, the herbs and the medicine. Can you kind of connect those more for us?
Sure.
And then how does that lead to acupuncture?
Okay, so all the old medicines of the world were tied to underlying philosophies, oftentimes underlying religions. That's different in some respects now with Western or modern medicine it's scientific. It's that the science is the philosophy, right? The medicine that I practice is tied to the old Chinese model of reality of the universe, the heaven above, man or human beings in the middle, and the earth in the bottom. And all the medicine that I practice is related to the transformation of life and cycles of life, the seasons, the wet patterns of weather, the movement of the stars in the sky. And for us now in the modern world, we might think that's far out or it's a projection of ancient people. But the more you familiarize yourself with it, the more true and valid it is. And so you're taught that your body is really a manifestation of the same patterns, larger patterns of the cosmos and of the earth. Your body is a product of that. So there are patterns in the body that we identify. And so for acupuncture, it's a closed system. You have whatever resources in your body that you have, and acupuncture is used to move those resources through the body according to channels that you've seen on those charts, but also according to those same principles that we observe in nature, right? So that certain parts of your body are more dominant than others, certain channels are more dominant, and so we have to understand what those relationships are. Same goes, but a little more sophisticated with the herbal medicine, that you're identifying different natures of each plant or element that you are prescribing. So the taste, the temperature, and the temperature meaning what it does when you ingest it, if you get warm or if you get cold, what part of the body it affects, what the side effects might be, and then how to use other herbs to ameliorate those side effects. So it's basically looking at an entire system, an entire person, understanding that, and that there's rarely a one-to-one situation. Oh, you're short of breath, you take this. No, it's why are you short of breath? How do we remove that symptom, but also make sure that the root cause is addressed so it doesn't come back.
And I think, one of the things we talked about prior to the interview is mindset, right? So looking at how in traditional medicine is to keep you on medicine. For some people, it's like forever. You need to always be on this type of medication. Whereas in your practice, it's the opposite.
Absolutely.
Like
so,
what you just said.
Right. So in my time, that I learned that in China, it would be frowned upon if you were prescribed medicine for long term. They would think that you're a poor doctor and the medicine doesn't work. Why, if you're giving me this and I'm still on it, it doesn't work. Right. And so that mindset tells you a lot about what the expectations are, not just from the expectations for a doctor, but the expectation for healing.
Yeah.
Right, that healing can happen. You just need the right elements.
Right.
So the idea is to identify what is the root problem that your body is expressing itself in this way, and you address that. And if you address that, those symptoms should change. They might create a new pattern that you have to address, but that would mean a different approach, right? So you're not on the same medication.
Okay, so the difference between Western and Eastern is Eastern wants to get to the root, while Western is just busy smacking or slapping Band-Aids on, like, the problem, kind of.
Right. I think it's a systemic problem because there's a lot of resignation. If the doctor sees you and they don't expect you to go home and exercise, they don't expect you to go home and change your diet. They think you're just going to continue doing what you've been doing and it's not their place. Or they send you to a specialist, and they're not really keeping in touch with what medications the specialist is prescribing, etc. So I just think it's a comprehensive issue. It's not as simple as right or wrong. But I also understand that's where people like myself, we fit in to be able to say, hey, these are changes that can be made that can help over time change your condition. And if your Western doctors more aware, they can start changing what you're doing.
Throughout your journey, going through med school and being around probably the majority of people didn't look like you, right?
That's right.
And there's, like I said, a certain mindset already in traditional medicine, and then you have you coming in, learning about the Eastern practices and things, and I just want to ask more about how your experience was going through that as probably one of the few people of color in that practice.
That's right. I was the only, in my graduating class, I was the only black person. And you know, going through schools and different schools in my life, that's not an unfamiliar feeling,
Right.
but it is a concern, right? Because everybody needs help, and everyone should have access to this medicine that survived thousands of years, and it incorporates many herbs from Africa, from the New World, from Europe, because that was the circulation of ideas back in the ancient world. So my experience was not easy, but at the same time, there's a certain kind of pride that you can take that you're continuing a tradition, and that for me, and it's for everyone should know, that the first people to embrace Chinese medicine was the black community in the West Coast. The Black Panthers initiated in the 70s a health program around acupuncture and herbs. So the connection between our communities is long-standing, and so it's a rite of passage in a way for me.
Yeah.
But I'm also aware that there is a distinction to be made, and oftentimes this medicine in private practice takes on a boutique nature, right? And it becomes expensive, and it becomes difficult to access. And then in our normal settings, there aren't too many people integrated into hospitals or into clinics. So how do you get the medicine? And that's one thing that I'm looking to address as best possible.
And that's why we're kind of putting on this show, so that we could get things like this out there. But you said that our communities, that Panthers kind of use this medicine. Why do you think it's not really talked about?
Because it works.
Because it works.
It works, and it challenges some fundamental things about nature itself, right? So it's an entire paradigm. It's not as simple as one thing is right or one thing is wrong. You have to understand two things can be correct and different at the same time. And that model of thinking is contrary to the way we're taught to live. And let's face it, this medicine is very ancient, but you can't patent certain herbs. You can't patent certain things, needles, or these concepts. And so it's not as profitable in many ways as Western medicine is. And there's also, they call it a sick care system rather than a health care system.
Yeah.
And one thing you notice, and again, my friends who are Chinese, who, I'm very grateful for their teaching me, because here are the herbs that you're using. Well, we use them in this dish, we use them in this balm, we use them these ways. And then you realize that how much poison our culture is willing to accept, right? So it's not just the drugs that we take as medicines, but the food that we eat, how the food is packaged, what is in our environment, etc. That we're willing to accept so much poison, and that the real answer that the culture has provided is to then go to the hospital, then take these drugs, etc. Whereas these more holistic approaches say, well, you have to really change your entire lifestyle. You have to limit what you're willing to take into your system, and make more comprehensive changes. So those things, being at the foundation of the medicine, they work, they're sustainable, and therefore they don't catch on as well. And there's also, it's not a simple right or wrong. scenario also, like some of the phrases that I might use in my paperwork or in the clinic may sound very far out, so it's difficult to teach too.
Yeah.
It's not like chemistry. So,
So this requires self-discipline. And that's like one of the things that actually help heals. Because like if you can control what you eat, you basically can control like a lot of things. Like in our society, I don't feel like we have enough control. Or, you know, like we'll do good eating for a while and then it's like, oh, but I kind of miss having this pork chop. And we all know that, like, fried pork chops are, like, what we tend to go to, and that's really bad. But with this, it's, like, it's diet, it's mind, and then you top it off with the energy moving. Is that what acupuncture is, kind of, in a way?
acupuncture works in several different ways. Your body has certain patterns, right? From small to large, and like a wave. And acupuncture helps change those patterns, so it changes the shape. Small change in one section can affect a large, comprehensive system. Your energy and matter are on this, different sides of the spectrum, and so you're working in that with that. So you're sometimes dealing with the yin stuff, which is fluid and bone, structural stuff, and yang, which is more energy, which could be like neurotransmitters or hormones or what have you, in scientific terms, electromagnetism, stuff that are part of your body. And so you're working with all those things with particular techniques, right, with understanding of what resources reside where in the body and how to move them.
So you were talking about the fact that it's not spoken about. We talked about the Black Panthers utilizing Eastern medicine. My question is thinking about why it's not talked about, stigmas being attached to the practice. Personally, I never had experienced acupuncture until I did it with you, and I was like, wow, this is pretty amazing. Why are we always looking for a quick fix? Like, oh, let me pop a Tylenol, I have a headache. Let's figure out why, right? Get to the root of it and resolve it so it doesn't keep coming back. But how do you address the stigmas? People might say, oh, that's witchcraft, or all these different types of ideas people have. How do you address that and really educate them on what it actually is?
Well, it really depends on the person.
Yeah.
Like where I can go, where I have to read them and see, will I use humor, will I use something more stern? One thing I do point out is that someone very often will come in and they will say, my back is killing me. They want to do another surgery. I said, and I've had 2 or 3 surgeries. Or someone says, I have anxiety and depression, I've been on anxiety medicine for 10 years. Is that witchcraft? Why do you need to believe in what I do, but you don't question what's been done to you,
Right.
and it hasn't satisfied your need? And so then you just bring people back to real basic things, right? One of the cores of our medicine is just to see how you feel in climate. So do you run hot? Are you cold all the time? Are you thirsty? Are you sleeping well? How are your bowel movements? The things that people think are just like their private, particular things of who they are, actually have a lot of information about how your body is functioning and how you are functioning. So you start to explain these things, and people understand it's common sense. And then you say, well, most Western medicines, or many of them, are derived from plants.
Right.
They just isolate one particular molecule out of the plant and use that kind of without any concern for what the effects would be, just hoping to get positive effect. And yet, ginseng will have thousands of molecules in it. Now I add ginseng to cinnamon bark and cinnamon twig, which are different and have their own component, thousands of molecules. And then you add these different roots and these different leaves, and you have a concoction that's been used for 1,000 years, but how do you really measure that? You can't in their model. You can't isolate one or two things that out of 10,000. And so in many ways, I understand science is miraculous. The products of science are miraculous, but nature is more miraculous. And so when you get people to understand that this is not, that you're not asking people to believe in something, you're asking people to understand what it is that they're participating in.
Right.
And then then you can have faith that at least you're part of a system that has been observing the effects of these herbs and these interventions for at least 5,000 years. I mean, that's a scientific study to beat all of them.
Right.
So there was an example you had shared with us previously about a bruised arm. Do you want to share that with us?
Sure. So the question that often happens is, well, especially with muscular or skeletal injuries, how does acupuncture work? And like recently I sprained my ankle, and of course the body knows that there's an injury and it sends all this attention to it. It's very much like a fire on the street. The firefighters come, the police come, the EMTs come, and the fire's put out, so whatever that direct injury was is put out. And then all the attention goes away, but the burned building is still on the street. Or the tendons are still very sore, there's still swelling, there's still discomfort. So what acupuncture can do is it can help promote movement, promote the circulation of qi, what's called qi in blood, and get old blood out of the system and new fresh blood into the system. So reducing pain, discomfort, swelling, and bringing healing nutrients to those areas, especially some that don't, even in a healthy situation, don't receive as much blood.
So out with the old and with the new is
That's
pretty
right.
much what acupuncture kind of does.
Right.
So it moves stagnant. Is it yin and yang?
Right, yin and yang, yeah.
Yin and yang, and then it also helps produce new things. So
Right.
you want a different outcome. I don't even know where I'm going with this, but so we talked about like diet and what is it? But what is actually acupuncture when you're sticking needle? Like, what is it? Other than
Okay.
how do you
Process.
move that? Yeah, how do you move that out? How do you get with the out and in with the no? kind of?
Okay, so it depends on, again, where on the body the issue is. It's gonna, wherever it is, it's gonna be on a channel. Right? And these channels are these major circuits that follow in many regards, but not all regards, where how the nerves and the vascular system move in the body. But they're different. But kind of basically, you can lay a chart over, that familiar chart. You can see these major pathways. Those pathways are related to one another, right? So depending on where the injury is, you can sometimes what they call distal, like far away needling. So if your hip is injured, I might needle your foot or needle your hand on a complementary channel, and it awakens that network, right? And so it'll start to move the blood or the qi. Then over time, you might go right locally to the area and insert the needles around it and along the channels. So it's sophisticated in a way. You have to understand where the injury is, what channels are related, and then also why isn't it healing, or is it just something that just happened? But basically, you're patterning, you're sending a message to the body and hoping that the body picks up on that message, and over time changes. Another analogy I use is that many years ago they reintroduced wolves to Yellowstone Park, and a few years later they started noticing birds and plants that they thought were extinct. And they wondered why it was that all of a sudden these old things that they thought were gone are re-emerging. And it turns out that without the wolves, the large prey animals didn't have anything to worry about, so they just used the same pathways. When the wolves came, they were threatened, so they had to move differently. So by moving differently, they changed the way the water was flowing from the streams. They would move seeds to different parts of the area, which would, invigorate life. And so that same notion is there with the body, that your body gets used to a certain pattern, and then when you reintroduce or you introduce a different pattern, health can emerge.
It's a great imagery.
Yeah, that was beautiful. So needling is what exactly?
So there are different size needles, but they're very thin, solid. There's nothing injected in the body. Needles have been in use for many years, but now they're stainless steel, sometimes copper, sometimes gold plated, silver plated needles, but usually just stainless steel. Extremely thin, I think like 10 hairs to one needle.
So everybody's question is, does it hurt?
Does it hurt? It can pinch here and there if you're doing the hands or some areas that are sensitive, but we try our best not to elicit any pain. There are some techniques that require that you get what they call a chi response, which is where you'll feel a heavy sensation or an electrical sensation, because again, we're trying to elicit that response and get the body to respond in a certain way. It's not like getting a flu shot. You don't feel that needle going in, or getting blood drawn. It's not the same kind of experience.
So you use the needles, you use herbs, and there's at least one more component that you use. Can you talk about that? Like I don't know what it's called.
Moxibustion?
There you go.
Yeah, so moxibustion is, there's an herb, mugwort, which is used to, you burn it basically either directly on the skin or in sticks, and the heat and the material from the mugwort penetrates the skin, and so it's known as a very yang herb. It warms you up. It's very good for chronic pain, for getting people who tend to be cold to warm up, to help them transform the fluids in their body. So that's something it's used very often. We make poultices and plasters and different rubs, materials for the skin for external application. And we do Tui Na, which is a massage technique, and Gua Sha, which is becoming more popular, which is scraping. Use a spoon or a stone and you scrape and you break open blood vessels, again to promote circulation. Cupping is popular now, so cupping, and Qigong and Tai Chi, things like that, exercises to cultivate Qi and promote circulation.
Nice. It's a nice list.
So with all that being said, how do you see this in the future becoming more, I don't want to say mainstream, but more accepted by our community, being more visible and more accessible for people in our community?
Well, I think in some ways, when insurances, which they are more open to paying for the service, more people will take the service. More people take the service, good word of mouth, and it will spread. I think realistically that's one thing that, because I hear it all the time, I'm into it, but I don't know, will my insurance pay for it? Where do I go? What do I do? So that's my responsibility. I'm grateful for an opportunity like this to spread the word and say that it will help you and to seek it out. But the future's hard to perceive because the country's going through a lot right now. And in some ways it might be just small scale operations like myself and privately reaching out, going to working with young people especially to get them familiar with things so that sometimes like sports injuries, you can get the swelling down, you can help people as they're doing things. If young people especially are interested in the teas and stuff that I make, we'll work with kids a lot. And so it's just that slow process of introducing the medicine to people.
Yeah.
But institutionally, the more acupuncture is integrated and eventually Chinese herbal medicine is integrated, the better off we'll be. Locally there aren't too many places, but in Boston and New York and big cities, they're open to it.
I think actually the pandemic really opened up a lot of people to different measures of doing things because they were limited to their traditional ways and they didn't want to be around a lot of people. So this might be the perfect time to say, hey, these are your options as well. You don't have to necessarily, pop this pill or get this surgery, which can be quite costly as well, right? So if people are looking for alternative methods to be more safe, that may be their initial reason, but it can lead to a lifelong effect. So hopefully this can help somebody who's looking for alternate options.
Yeah. So are we wrapping up? So if someone needed to get in contact with you, how would they be able to reach you?
Okay, so Second Son Acupuncture. The best way right now to reach me would be my name, Todd Jones, .medicine@gmail.com, and from there we can get you consult and perhaps schedule an appointment. So.
Okay, and then. No, forget it. I was gonna say, as far as insurances go, are you accepting insurance, or
right
how
now
does it
I'm
work?
in the process of what's the word? Being credentialed, and so it's been longer than I thought it would be, but soon I should be credentialed to take people who are on like Cigna, Blue Cross, and the array of Mass Health. So hopefully, I know they pay for it, so it's a good way to at least start.
Yes. All right. Fingers crossed it's going to be sooner than later. And then, this is corny, but you mentioned like Qigong, and I just feel like we should all just like close out with like just doing a little bit of, is this even Qi? Sorry.
There is part of that, but that's kind of at the end of 20 minutes of, you got to get that stuff circulating before you do the tapping, but definitely. That is part of it. Yeah.
Well, it was nice interviewing you. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.